Welcome everybody to today's presentation. My name is Dr. Silkman and I'm from the Foul Play team. I recently did a video entitled How the State Effectively Diffused the Importance of Item FL, and if you're interested, I've got the link right over here. And in that presentation, I looked at the state's response to Kathleen Zellner's filing and how the state handled the research findings of Dr. Christopher Palenik in terms of Item FL. But what struck me as being very curious, I wanted to know why the state was so dismissive of Dr. Palenik's findings. And so what I wanted to do is to actually go back and have a look at Dr. Christopher Palenik's analysis of Item FL. And in particular, I wanted to have a look at his affidavit. Now, as you know, Kathleen Zellner employed Dr. Palenik to examine Item FL. And Dr. Chris Palenik is from Microtrace. And their company has been involved in many high-profile cases. So Dr. Christopher Palenik was or still is a research microscopist, and he has a lot of experience looking at microtrace evidence. So what I would like to do is to go through his affidavit step by step and see what potentially was controversial and what the state didn't particularly like about his research findings. So the very first part of his affidavit is part 1, scientific findings, bullet Item FL. And the first thing he did was he described his background and approach. And I quote, "The purpose of this examination was to determine if evidence of bone could be detected on the surface of bullet Item FL. Point 9. The following analytical approach was utilized. A. Perform the first in-depth photo documentation and microscopical examination of the Item FL bullet. This was conducted by a combination of stereo microscopy and digital video microscopy, the latter of which was used to produce a map of the bullet surface and the debris adhering to it. The microscopes used were manufactured in 2016. Part B. Characterization of the bullet by scanning electron microscopy and energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, SEM, EDS. Using the digital images of the bullet surface as a guide, specific areas were examined in detail and analyzed to determine their elemental composition. The inorganic portion of bone is composed almost entirely of calcium, phosphorus, and oxygen, all of which are detectable by this approach. The SEM EDS equipment used was produced in 2016. So Dr. Palenik was charged to analyze Item FL, the bullet fragment that was found in the Steven Avery garage on March the 2nd, 2006. And we can see here Dr. Palenik in front of his equipment. So it appeared that Dr. Palenik used the correct instrumentation in order to examine the exemplar bullets. Exemplar bullet examination, proof of concept. Before you do any form of experimentation, you've actually got to show that the methods that you're going to use are indeed sound and reproducible. So, point number 10. In preparation for this examination, 4 exemplar bullets fired through bone by Luke Haig were examined at our laboratory. And remember, Lucien Haig, my apologies, he also was hired by Kathleen Zellner. A. The exemplar bullets were initially examined and photo documented by a combination of stereo microscopy and digital video microscopy to assess the overall condition of the bullet. This initial examination showed the presence of white translucent particles consistent with the presence or with the appearance of bone on the surface of or embedded in each of the 4 exemplar bullets. B. After the initial examination and documentation, the bullets were individually packaged and submitted to independent forensics for DNA extraction to simulate the process to which item FL bullet had been subjected. Independent forensics laboratory supervisor Liz Kopecki placed each of the damaged bullets in separate test tubes and submerged them in buffer fluid. Ms. Kopecki then shook the test tubes in her hand. Part C. The post-extraction exemplar bullets were again examined and photo documented by a combination of stereo microscopy and digital video microscopy. This examination showed that white translucent particles morphologically consistent, and I'll continue this in a second, and as you can see here, Lucien Haig fired bullets, .22 caliber bullets, into the scapulars of bovine. He then took the bullets from the ballistic gel and handed them over to Chris Palenik. And we can see here an image of one of those exemplar bullets. So the important thing so far to gather from this is that Dr. Palenik had performed the correct control experiments on the Haig exemplar bullets. In other words, what he wanted to do was to mimic what Sherry Culhane had done to item FL, and that is she had placed the bullet in a buffer in order to extract the DNA from the bullet. So this extraction procedure had no or minimal effect on the fragments, the potential bone fragments or the translucent particles that were embedded in the exemplar bullets. And I continue. With bone remained on, embedded in each of the 4 exemplar bullets. That is, the DNA extraction conducted by independent forensics, which was meant to simulate the extraction process item FL was subjected to, did not cause the white translucent particles consistent with bone to fall or become dislodged from the exemplar bullet. D. SEM EDS analysis of debris on 2 of the exemplar bullets showed, as expected, the co-occurrence of calcium, phosphorus, and oxygen in areas identified by digital video microscopy as containing white translucent particles that appear to be fragments of bone. And you can see that on the image on the right hand side. Those white translucent particles are fragments of bone. 11. This study of exemplar bullets demonstrates the following. A. Particles consistent with bone were detected on each of the 4 exemplar bullets that were studied. B. This approach used a combination of stereo microscopy, digital video microscopy, and scanning electron microscopy was shown to be suitable for the in situ documentation and identification of bone on a bullet. If indications of bone were detected by these methods, further analytical approaches could be applied to more specifically confirm its presence. Particles consistent, this is part C, particles consistent with bone were detected on the exemplar bullets after they were subjected to a DNA extraction process, meant to simulate the DNA extraction process extraction performed on item FL. So this was very, very important, because what it highlighted was that Dr. Palenik's analysis of the 4 Hague exemplar bullets proved that his scientific approach was robust and also reproducible. So now he was given item FL to perform his analysis on, and we can see the images of item FL on the right hand side. And I quote, bullet item FL analysis 12. On the 23rd of May 2017, a bullet was hand carried to Microtrace by Special Agent Jeff Wish of the Wisconsin Department of Justice. 13. The bullet remained in the custody of Secret Surface Agent Wishtich during the analysis performed at Microtrace. The bullet was opened, photo documented, and examined using a combination of stereo microscopy and digital video microscopy. 15. This examination revealed that the bullet surface was covered in debris exhibiting the following characteristics. A waxy substance covers a significant portion, about 40%, of the leading surface of the bullet. This material may be related to the waxes used by firearm analysts to orientate and hold bullets during their analysis. Further analysis of the waxy material could clarify this point. B. Numerous fine red flakes are on or embedded in the waxy substance. C. Numerous fibers are observed adhering to the waxy substance. Most of these are colorless. However, red and black fiber fragments were also noted. Other white fibers not associated with the waxy surface were observed in association with the bullet. These fibers could be more specifically identified after isolation and further analysis. D. Numerous wood fragments are present in, on, and or under the waxy substance. Further analysis could elucidate their specific relationship to the waxy substance. Other wood fragments appear to be directly adhering to or embedded in the lead of the bullet. This later observation suggests that at least some of the wood was deposited when the energized bullet encountered a wooden object. Some of the fragments observed are individual particles of wood. One particle appears to be an agglomeration of woody fragments, possibly originating from a manufactured wood product such as chip or particle board. Isolation and analysis of these particles would be required if their specific identity, e.g. species, type of wood product, is of interest. E. A rounded red droplet, approximately 0.073 millimeters squared, adjacent to a smaller red droplet, approximately 0.005 millimeters squared, is present on one side of the bullet. The identity of this dried liquid is presently unknown. Based upon its color and the fact that the bullet was previously extracted for DNA, it seems unlikely that this is blood. The color, texture, and shape of the deposit suggests that the material may be paint. Regardless of its identity, the texture of the bullet in the area where the droplets are observed strongly suggests that the droplet was deposited after the bullet was fired and came to rest. This material could be identified if subjected to further analysis. F. No particles consistent with bone were detected by an examination using stereomicroscopy or digital video microscopy. And we can see on the right hand side some of the material that was found on the surface of item FL. So the important thing about Dr. Palenik's finding was that Dr. Palenik's scientific analysis of item FL proved it did not contain particles of bone. And here are some more diagrams showing item FL using high-powered microscopy, and we can see the top of the bullet, and we can see the image on the right-hand side, and you can clearly see precisely what Dr. Palenik was referring to in terms of the wax, the red substance, the wood, and also some of the fibers that were found present on the bullet. And here is a close-up of item FL, again showing that there were wood shards that were embedded in the lead of the bullet, and we can also see that red substance on the surface of the bullet. And Dr. Palenik basically stated that it's very unlikely to be blood because Sherry Culhane had washed the bullet in a buffer meant to extract any material that was on the surface of the bullet. Here is a close-up showing particles of wood and also the red material that has been embedded on the surface of the bullet. Okay, I continue. Now, point 16. Note that the criteria for classification each material described above is based upon in situ observations and are not necessarily inclusive of all particle types that may be present. A more thorough examination would require the physical isolation of the debris for a more detailed analysis. Now remember, this is one of the points that the state was very, very critical of. Now, quite clearly, what Dr. Palenik was referring to was that if he wanted to determine what type of wood it was and where it came from, he actually had to extract or remove those items from the bullet. So he would have needed permission from the state in order to do that, because he's in actual fact interfering with a forensic piece of evidence. 17. The sample was examined without any further preparation in a JEOL 7110 FT field emission scanning electron microscope with a 50 mm squared Oxford STD EDS detector. A. The base of the bullet was fixed upon a piece of conductive double-sided carbon tape. B. An image of the bullet was obtained at 20 kilovolts. The sample was examined by a combination of backscatter and secondary electron imaging at magnifications ranging from 50 times to 2000 times. C. Elemental maps were collected from various areas on the leading surface of the bullet that showed surfaces with exposed lead, i.e. away from the waxy deposit. The elemental maps were examined for areas with elevated levels of calcium and phosphorus. Each area analyzed was rotated toward the EDS detector to increase the number of X-rays detected. D. no areas with elevated levels of calcium and phosphorus were detected, indicating the absence of detectable bone. E. A few silicon-rich areas were noted, which may suggest the presence of silicate compounds, e.g. minerals. F. No particles consistent with bone were detected by SEM-EDS analysis. 18. Following the analysis, the bullet was repackaged, sealed, and retained by SA Wish. So, Dr. Palenik's scientific analysis of item FL proved it did not contain elevated levels of calcium and phosphorus, indicating the absence of detectable bone. So what are the conclusions that Dr. Chris Palenik came up with? 19. Based upon our analyses, there is no evidence to indicate that the bullet passed through bone. In fact, the particular evidence that is present strongly suggests an alternate hypothesis, which is that the trajectory of the fired bullet took it into a wooden object, possibly a manufactured wood product. Furthermore, the presence of red droplets deposited on the bullet suggests that the bullet had picked up additional contamination from its environment at some point after coming to rest, i.e. droplets of potential red paint or a red liquid. So let me just reinstate that finding. Dr. Chris Palenik is saying that the bullet did not go through a human being first. It went directly into a wood product, and he stated possibly a manufactured wood product. After the majority of the energy of the bullet had been expended, it hit a red object, and hence it picked up that red coloration on certain parts of the bullet. Point 20. Based upon these findings, it is our understanding that an investigator was sent by the Zellner Law Office to the Avery garage to review the area for possible sources of the particulate types described above. It is our understanding that the following possible sources were identified. A. Particle board in the garage with apparent bullet holes. B. Red painted surfaces, including a ladder in the garage and a red painted ceiling. So as you can see here, and we covered this in one of our coffee podcasts, Kathleen Zellner and some of her colleagues went back to Steven Avery's garage and examined it. And lo and behold, she had found bullet holes that were in the wood paneling of the garage itself. And when she dismantled some of the wood paneling, there were fibers, like insulation type fibers, in between the walls of the garage. So what Kathleen Zellner did was that she fired .22 caliber bullets directly into the wood. Kathleen Zellner's exemplar bullets were then handed over to Dr. Christopher Palenik, and he compared item FL with Kathleen Zellner's exemplar bullet that went through the wooden wall. And as you can see here, both bullets, both item FL and Kathleen's exemplar bullets, both contain shards of wood embedded into the soft lead. So, Dr. Palenik's scientific analysis of item FL and Kathleen's exemplar bullet proved that both contain embedded shards of wood particles. And it was very easy to show that the reason why the bullet had picked up wooden shards was because it was directly fired into the garage wall, which was wooden. Now, the state had stated, and I quote, "A more detailed analysis would be necessary." Point 21. Each of the above listed materials observed on the bullet could be identified specifically if their actual identity is of importance to the investigation. This may provide further constraints or refinement of the hypothesis I have advanced. To facilitate this, specimens would need to be isolated from the bullet and analyzed individually. Isolation and analysis could be conducted using only a small portion of the material available. The potential sources for the particulate matter that were recently collected from the Avery garage could be directly compared to materials on the bullet. However, no matter if Dr. Palenik was not able to do these analytical tests, one thing that cannot be disputed, and that is the presence of bone was not found in item FL. Okay, now we need to pay very close attention to the state's response to Kathleen Zellner's filing, and I quote an important passage from that filing. I quote, "Avery has misunderstood why item FL was significant. Item FL was significant because it was both fired from the gun in Avery's bedroom and had Teresa Halbach's DNA on it, meaning the bullet touched some part of Miss Halbach's tissue at some point and therefore linked the gun to Miss Halbach's murder." Now this is very, very interesting for the following reason. While downplaying Dr. Palenik's analysis and findings, it was clear that the state absolutely needed item FL as part of their narrative against Steven Avery, despite not being the bullet that ultimately had killed Teresa Halbach. Okay, so let's have a look precisely at what the state had found. Now, William Newhouse absolutely showed that the Marlin Glenfield Model 60 rifle that was found in Steven Avery's bedroom had fired item FL, and item FL is a .22 caliber bullet. Item FL was found in Steven Avery's garage. William Newhouse looked at the landing and groove pattern on item FL and also examined the barrel of the Marlin Glenfield rifle, and they matched. That means that the rifle absolutely fired item FL. There's no dispute. Sherry Culhane had isolated DNA from item FL and had obtained the full genomic profile belonging to Teresa Halbach. Also, cranial bone fragments were found, and I'll go through this. Burnt cranial bone fragments with beveling were found in Steven Avery's burn pit. No exit wound cranial bone fragments were ever found. So these denote beveling that were caused by bullets entering into the skull. And as we can see here, when the medical examiner and Dr. Eisenberg were questioned, it meant that it showed or demonstrated that Teresa Halbach was shot at least twice in the skull, once in the parietal region and once in the occipital region. Now, the cranial bone fragments, they were x-rayed, and radio particles were found near the beveling. These were determined to be lead fragments. Now, what is important here is that Kenneth Olson did not link item FL to the lead fragments in the cranial bone fragments. Now, this is important to state, and that is the state never directly said that item FL or item FK, that was the other bullet fragment found in the garage, had caused the cranial bone beveling, but had strongly implied it during the trial. So even Ken Kratz wrote about this in his book. They never said that item FL or item FK directly caused the cranial bone damage in the cranial fragments. However, let's look at this a little bit more closely, and let's have a look at what the state failed to mention about item FL. So this is what we've got at the moment. We've got the Marlin Glenfield Model 60 rifle that was in Steven Avery's bedroom, had fired item FL, and Sherry Culhane had found the full genomic profile on the bullet belonging to Teresa Halbach. However, when the rifle was looked at and examined, no DNA belonging to Steven Avery was found on the rifle. No DNA belonging to Teresa Halbach was found on the rifle. No blood was found on the rifle. And believe it or not, fingerprint analysis was not done on the rifle. In regards to the DNA analysis done by Sherry Culhane, Sherry Culhane had contaminated the negative PCR control. Culhane required a deviation request form, and it had not been properly signed. Her own supervisor, Marie Variani, did not sign the request form. She went to another colleague in another laboratory in order to sign it, and we'll go over this later on. The actual deviation request form that she wanted really was without merit. It was not fit for purpose for what she wanted to use it for. Furthermore, there was no DNA left to retest and do another PCR. Sherry Culhane had used all the DNA that was present on the bullet. Now, enter Dr. Chris Palenik from Microtrace. He showed that item FL had no bone shards, but it had wood shards embedded in the soft lead. There appeared to be red paint flecks, a waxy substance, and cotton fibers. Clearly, item FL had never struck bone. It was not responsible for the cause of the beveling in the cranial bone fragments. But very importantly, it was not the cause of death of Teresa Halbach. Because remember, the medical examiner, Dr. Eisenberg, said that she died, Teresa Halbach died as a result of 2 gunshot wounds to the skull. Clearly, item FL did not cause any of that beveling. When Sherry Culhane examined item FL, she found no blood on the bullet, no stains on the bullet, and no tissue noted on the bullet at all. So, what would happen? If the DNA evidence was in fact inadmissible? So what we have here, we definitely know that the Marlin Glenfield Model 60 rifle that was present in Steven Avery's bedroom, they had fired item FL. There's no dispute. But if the DNA evidence was regarded as being inadmissible, then the following would take place. The state would not be able to link Steven Avery to the firing of item FL by the Marlin Glenfield rifle. The case against Steven Avery will be purely circumstantial, and the state cannot prove that Teresa Halbach was ever in his trailer or garage. Now, here's the important bit. Kathleen Zellner can argue that Teresa Halbach's DNA was present as a result of cross-contamination of the bullet sample, whereas the state cannot explain why item FL contained embedded wood shards, paint, wax, and cotton fibers. The state would have to rely on speculation. This, of course, would generate reasonable doubt for Steven Avery. Now, the obvious thing is, who else could have fired item FL? And the question I'm asking is, was item FL actually fired by Roland Johnson? Now, Roland Johnson, he was the actual owner of the trailer that Steven Avery was living in. Furthermore, he was the owner of the rifle that was hung up in Steven Avery's bedroom. In actual fact, there was another rifle present there as well. It was on a rack. And during court, he was asked if he had ever fired that rifle and also pointed to caliber bullets from it. And he said, and I quote, maybe 5 or 6 bricks, which are 500 a brick, 25, 3,000 times. So he would have fired that rifle all around the salvage yard, including around the garage, around about 3,000 times. So it's very likely that the any bullets that were found or shell casings that were found were from Roland Johnson firing his own weapon. Now, when Kathleen Zellner went to Steven Avery's garage, lo and behold, what she found was, and I'll quote, Steven Avery's garage with bullet holes in the wood paneling facing into the garage. In other words, bullets were fired from the outside, hit the garage wall, and either the bullet had embedded into the wood or it had fallen to the ground. And Kathleen Zellner was able to reproduce this herself with test firing. Now, why is this potentially so nefarious? Why is the state closely guarding the importance of item FL, but at the same time downplaying Dr. Palenik's findings? Well, we looked no further than the actual trial, and we discovered that very early on the 11th of November 2005, Special Agent Tom Fassbender had phoned Sherry Culhane. She's the one that did all the swabbing, and she's the one that did all the DNA analysis. And Sherry Culhane actually wrote on the telephone communication form what Special Agent Tom Fassbender said to her. And I quote, try to put her in his house or garage. And in actual fact, Sherry Culhane did. We know about the key that had Steven Avery's DNA on it. So in effect, it was a personal item of Teresa Halbach that was present in his house or trailer. And of course, we have the analysis of item FL, which had Teresa Halbach's DNA on it, and that was present in the garage. So Sherry Culhane, in actual fact, did put her in his house or garage. Now, the question I'm asking is this an example of professional misconduct? What is the lead investigator in the case against Steven Avery doing, phoning the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory head, the very person who will be doing all the analysis of the samples? Simply unbelievable. Also, we know that Sherry Culhane had asked for a deviation request form, and we can see the request form over here. Now, when you do a request form, you have to give a reason why you want to do that request. and I have to read it out. Normally, the sample would be re-extracted, but in this case, there is no sample to re-extract. According to our current protocol, this sample would be only used for exclusionary purposes. However, in this case, the presence of my DNA in the manipulation control does not interfere with the interpretation of the profile from sample FL. Therefore, I propose a deviation from the protocol, allowing me to use sample FL for inclusionary purposes. Well, I'm afraid that cannot be done. So she had broken several rules here, laboratory rules. First of all, Sherry Culhane needed to re-extract the sample, basically meaning that because contamination was present, everything needed to be thrown out and started again. However, there was no sample to re-extract. This type of form, the deviation request form, can only be used for exclusionary purposes. Sherry Culhane wanted to use it for inclusionary purposes, in other words, to state that item FL contained Teresa Halbach's DNA. The actual form itself was not signed by Sherry Culhane's supervisor, Marie Variali. She actually went to the Milwaukee laboratory and Gretchen de Groot had signed the form. She needed the signature of a supervisor. And what's really telling is in that this is the very first time that Sherry Culhane ever had requested such a form. This goes to show the seriousness of the failure by Sherry Culhane to do a clean experiment. But furthermore, it indicated that because she had used up all the DNA, the experiment could not be done again. Okay, now in her laboratory, there is a manual, a laboratory manual that goes through all the protocols. And one of the protocols talks about what to do when something happens to the controls. Sherry Culhane had contaminated the negative control, the negative PCR control. And I quote, "A negative control is a test for the possible presence of contamination occurring during amplification setup. If in the allele typing areas a negative control exhibits identifiable alleles, peaks, greater than the analysis parameters, not attributable to an artifact. The DNA specimens amplified at the same time as the negative control will be considered inconclusive for match purposes. However, these specimens may be used for exclusionary purposes." So there we have in black and white exactly what Sherry Culhane needed to do, i.e. toss out the results and start again. So why is item FL so important to the state's case? And I refer to when Sherry Culhane was questioned by Buting. Question: let's close with this. Other than the bullet, all your other tests, none of them put Teresa Halbach ever in his garage or his house or in any of his vehicles, right? Correct. And I'll reread what the state wrote in the filing response. Avery has misunderstood why item FL was significant. Item FL was significant because it was both fired from the gun in Avery's bedroom and had Teresa Halbach's DNA on it, meaning the bullet touched some part of Miss Halbach's tissue at some point and therefore linked the gun to Miss Halbach's murder. So now you know why item FL is crucial. If the DNA evidence is insubmissible, you cannot submit it. If a judge finds that Kathleen Zellner can successfully argue that the reason why the DNA got on that bullet was because of contamination, then you cannot link Steven Avery to the murder of Teresa Halbach without speculating. If you remove that DNA, then you cannot place Teresa Halbach in Steven Avery's garage. That's how critical item FL is to the state's case. Okay guys, I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I'm Dr. Silkman from the Foul Play team. If you enjoy our presentation, please come to our website, and the link is down below. This is our YouTube channel, and in the links you'll find that we have a social media presence, including a very extensive website where you'll find a lot of information. And on the YouTube channel, you'll see that we've done a very thorough analysis of both seasons 1 and 2 of MAM. We also have Powder Puff. The Powder Puff team do specific analyses of the Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey cases, as well as other cases as well, where people have been falsely placed in prison. We also have case readings as well. Thank you very much, guys. I'll catch you all later.